How long does it take to monetize your directory? Truth is, I don't know. I only know from my own personal experiences. So today I'm going to show you two different directories that I built, and each of them are doing pretty good. In September, one of them earned $2,300 in passive income, and the other one earned around $1,000 in passive income. And I don't really like that word because it assumes I didn't do any work for this. In reality, I just front loaded it. So I spent probably 100 hours up front, and now it's kind of passively earning me money, but in no way was there no work involved. Now, you've probably heard that SEO takes time, and I agree, but that's kind of vague and doesn't really help answer how early you can start to monetize your directory and then how much you can make. So I'm going to share with you the entire monetization and traffic backstory from the very first month of me building these directories and what it looked like in month 6, month 12, how much money I was making, and all the way up until last month. And hopefully give you an idea of how much time it can take to actually get to a somewhat substantial amount in monthly passive income. Before we dive into this, I just want to preface this and say that I am kind of a lazy SEO, meaning I will do the on-page stuff, I'll make sure the directory is valuable, but I probably should be building more links than I am currently, and that is just the truth. With that said, I am a lazy but patient SEO, and I will wait and make small improvements until I feel like my directory is just as good as whatever's ranking number 1 in that niche. My point is, I don't think you need to be the best SEO in the world to get these results. I consider myself a mediocre SEO. I think my strengths lie more in hunting for the right niches that are kind of under the radar, as well as providing maximum value on the directories that I'm building. And then when you add patience to that mix, it seems to do pretty well. Lastly, the domains are blurred out. I hope you can respect that because this is the most transparent I've ever been when it comes to traffic, revenue, literally from day 0 to last month's revenue, which I show. That's just what it is. I don't want to invite competition. If you really want to know, you can join Ship Your Directory Pro, which is my private directory community where I often reference these directories in my educational resources as well as my weekly live streams. So you can check that out. Link is in the description below. Let's start with the story behind the very first directory that I ever built. And that was 3 years ago, almost to the day, in October 2022. I have my Google Analytics pulled up so we can take a look at some dates. I remember back in September 2022, I was in a pretty dark time of my life. I had just moved back in with my parents. My roommate was going to move in with his soon-to-be fiance. I had just closed down a business that I was working on for 5 years. So it was a time where I accepted that I was going to just get a 9-to-5 job. So in the meantime, I just started to self-teach myself SEO. I probably spent 100, 200 hours in the month of September just obsessively watching these YouTube videos from anyone who would show up if I typed in SEO on YouTube. And early October is when I started actually applying what I was learning, building a website from scratch in WordPress, copy and pasting things manually. And I remember setting a goal by the end of October 2022, I wanted to finish the website build. So that's why you start to see my initial traffic starts around early November. But at that point, I wasn't really thinking about my website. I was so new at SEO, I genuinely didn't know if what I was doing was correct or not. I probably didn't even know that it was getting traffic. And I also just got a job offer at that point, and I had to move up to Northern California. The only thing that I did do was make a Reddit post back in January 24th, 2023, and that explains this anomaly. There were 1,300 people that came to my website directory that day, and that kind of went viral in the niche subreddit that I posted on. And then basically from February to June 2023, I didn't even really remember my website existed. I started my job, I was doing training, and then I randomly logged in June 2023, and that's when I started to see 1,000 people a day were coming to my website. And I was like, I should probably do something about this, put up ads or something like that. And by the way, if you're wondering what happened here with this drop off where it just shows no users until October 2024, this is when Google Analytics 4 came out, and I remember there were a bunch of messages telling me to import or migrate my analytics account, and I didn't do that for many months. And so it kind of picks back up when I finally do it in October 2024. But I was getting traffic, and I did decide to put up ads using Ezoic. And here's my old Ezoic account. We can see it dates all the way back to July 15th, 2023. My very first day with display ads made me $19.38, which was absolutely mind-blowing. And then I did start to ramp up really quickly. I had some really solid days in the $50 and $60, and then I made $152 on July 26th. And that's when I was like, this is insane, because I thought I created something that was going to make $4,500 a month just passively. It wasn't the case. It did come back down. So after this spike, it did kind of equalize around the $40 a day mark. Some days were obviously less, some days were more. And then we see this massive drop down, which is when I started to migrate over over to Mediavine Journey. And that's because I heard great things about Mediavine, and Ezoic was good, but it did kind of slow down my website, so I wanted to try something else. But before we move on to that, I just wanted to show you the breakdown, the day-to-day. In those 11 months I was with Ezoic, I did make a little over $13,000, and you can see the day-to-day breakdown right here. Got my first $50 a day like a week later, and then of course that era where I just made $100 a day for a few days. But with that said, I did have some days that it dropped down to $25. So all in all, I started my directory back in October 2022. It took about 6 months to hit 1,000 users a day, and then I monetized in July, and that's when I was starting to make $1,000 a month passively with this directory. Now looking at Mediavine Journey, I did start monetizing on this platform around May 29th, 2024. Here you can see my total earnings from back in May 2024 to today, September 2025. It really started slow. My first day I made $1.61. And at that point, I was really questioning whether I should have made the move over, but I remembered that typically there's a 1 to 3 month ramp up period. And to add on to that, summer is usually a little bit lower in RPMs compared to other parts of the year. At the same time, I've decided to move on and build more directories. So it's not really eating up too much of my mind space. And we do kind of go back to, $40, $50 here, sometimes $60. If you're curious about the last 30 days, I did make around $1,800 in revenue, but it's pretty much all profit, to be honest. And I did have some really good days this month. I have been hitting kind of a stride with $100 days the last few days, so that's been pretty nice. So I would say this is above average compared to normal. I'm usually around the $1,500 to $1,600 a month range, but maybe we're going to Q4, so that has something to do with it. I did pull up my digital products as well that live on the same directory, and you can see I made $500 in September. It's usually around there. Sometimes I make a little bit less, sometimes I make a good amount more, but I think it averages out to around $500 a month, which brings this directory to right around $2,000 to $2,500 a month passively. Probably work on it 30 minutes a month, if that. I haven't really touched this directory in like 6 months, so I do need to update it. But that's the story of my first directory. Now, as far as timing and whether or not you'd be able to replicate the same level of progress in the same time frame, I will say this monetized pretty quickly. Hitting 1,000 users a day in 6 months is not typical, and I would attribute 2 factors that led to this success, one of which was just pure niche selection. I think I got really lucky in that sense. I did do a lot of research beforehand, and I found a competitor that was getting over 100,000 monthly visitors and basically made it better. But what I did do, which was more controllable, was I did build a backlink, just one, that was extremely relevant, super high quality, and brought traffic to my directory. And this single backlink was enough for me to get to page 1, rank 1, and overtake my competitor. So that is something that's more within your control that you could do. And finally, if you're wondering how much traffic this directory gets, in the last 28 days, it got 49,000 monthly clicks. And if we go to the 16 month, it is just shy of 1 million total clicks. Now, the second case study is a directory that I built back in June 2024. But I remember the whole point of this directory was to see how fast I could build it. And I built it in about a week and a half. I wanted to basically test to see if I could replicate the same success that I had with my very first directory, but in a slightly different niche. Also done manually in WordPress, copy and pasting information. So I finished this build back in mid-June, I believe, and you can see I didn't have the same momentum that I had in the very beginning compared to my first directory. I didn't hit 1,000 users a month until roughly October, which was around 4 months after I built it. And then after that, it basically died again. In December, we see like a few days where no one was coming to my website at all. So I kind of wrote this off. I didn't think it was going to become anything, but I continued to just leave it there. And then starting January, I did start to see a pretty nice uptick. We can see that there's 100 to 200 people a day coming to this website. And that's when I was like, I should probably monetize this. So early February, I applied for Mediavine Journey. I think I was probably around 4,000 monthly visitors when I applied. And by early February, I got accepted into Mediavine. So I started putting up display ads. Now we do see this massive spike that actually happened last week, and 12,716 people came to this directory. I will show you how much money I made that day, but it was just temporary. It kind of drops back down to a normal level. So the story arc with this directory is actually kind of insane. A pretty rags to riches story when it comes to the Mediavine display ad revenue. Here we can see the very first day I made 3 cents on February 11th, 2024. It did ramp up pretty quickly. A couple weeks later, I was making $2 a day. It does continue to grow a little bit, but it averages out to around $5 a day with some anomalies. And it stays that way for about 5 or 6 months. And things started to really change right around August August when I hit my first $19 day. Maybe 19 is my lucky number, but this is kind of when I started to notice like, there's actually some potential here. And then it just kind of stays there. And then of course we have the anomaly, which I'll show you. On September 26th, which was just last week, I made $394 that day because of the 12,000 people that came to my website. Since then, it's been really, really volatile, but still above average. So I don't really understand what's going on. If it comes back down to $20 a day, I am still a happy man. I was expecting this at most to earn $500 a month passively, so I'm cool with it. So as far as timing, I would say that this directory here reflects more of a normal path to ranking page 1, rank 1 for your niche. This is a pretty low competition niche, but there were a lot more competitors, and it took me about a year or a year and 1 month to rank page 1, rank 1. But one thing that I didn't do with this directory is I didn't build backlinks. And you can see that arguably this took twice as long to rank page 1, rank 1. And that's really when you start to get this ramp up in daily revenue for display ads. There's so many factors when it comes to getting a website directory to rank page 1, rank 1. But what I like about this is that it kind of shows you what would happen if you took the laziest approach possible, which is kind of what I did. Would I recommend this? Probably not. You saw how quickly you could grow with just one really high quality backlink with the first case study. So that's what I'd probably recommend you do. And lastly, if you're curious how much traffic this directory gets, in the last 28 days, it got almost 40,000 total clicks. If it weren't for this anomaly, I think I'm hovering right around 11 or 12,000 monthly clicks. So it's still pretty good, but it's not a massive website, definitely smaller than my first one. If we go to 3 months, it's 63,000, and then kind of lifetime, because this isn't even 16 months old, is 113,000 clicks. Well, hopefully that was cool and you learned something along the way. I think there are a lot of ways that you can expedite ranking a website, not just building backlinks, but buying an expired domain and utilizing the previous backlink juice that existed for an old domain. If you want me to cover a video around that, I'm happy to walk you through how I would go and buy and vet expired domains. But also just let me know if you found this valuable in any capacity. Always curious about your thoughts there. With that, I appreciate you watching, grateful for your support, and I'll catch you in another video. See ya.